Okay, things I've learned from horror movies. If you're ever on a road trip and you get stuck out in the middle of nowhere, you run out of gas, your car breaks down, whatever. If you see a secluded shack somewhere, don't go in there, okay? Stay the hell away. I don't care what you got to do. If your phone breaks down, you're shit out of luck. But do not go in any secluded shacks, no matter what you do, okay? If you can follow that, then everything else is cream cheese. Oh, and don't play cards with a lady that's got a tattoo of a dagger. Tourist Trap stars Tanya Roberts, Chuck Connors, and is directed by David Schmoller. What's up, guys? It's time for another slasher classic review. This is Tourist Trap from 1979. I've never seen this movie. I've always heard it in circles from time to time, and I went ahead and bought it, and I'm glad I did. I had a feeling this was going to be interesting, but there's a lot of interesting things about this movie to discuss, both inside the movie and outside the movie. So looking forward to it. But first off, let's give you a quick plot synopsis. This is one of those, I guess, road horror movies where you got this group of young people. They're on a trip somewhere and then their car breaks down, they get stuck. And the beginning of the movie, you got this guy, he's rolling a tire to this like shack. You know, it looks like a gas station, eatery type deal. Nobody around, not a good sign. But anyway, he goes in there looking for help because, you know, it's an irresistible premise that you can explain when you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere, because what are you going to do? You can either sit there and starve to death and die, or you can go try to get help. We've seen it time and time again in horror movies, and it's always explainable. But this guy goes into this room, there's nobody there, and he sees these mannequins, and then all of a sudden, it's like the room starts coming alive, and all these objects are thrown at him. And he dies. You know, there's this pipe that shoots right into his back. But this is not like your normal slasher movie. You know, there wasn't a killer that enters the frame with a knife or whatever weapon and stabs the guy to death. No, this was something out of the ordinary. You know, these inanimate objects just being thrown at the guy, but nobody's throwing them. So right away, going into this, I didn't know anything about the plot of this movie. And so I had questions like, why in the hell is this happening? What's going on here? Which I like. I like that. I like going into a movie not knowing what's going on. But meanwhile, back at the car, the friends, they're getting bored. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They don't know where their friend is. And so the girls, they decide to go skinny dipping while the guy goes and looks for his friend. And that's when this character, Mr. Slauson, comes into frame and he sees the girls. Basically tells them they're trespassing, but he helps them out. He seems very friendly. And so he brings them back to his house. But right away, you don't trust Mr. Slauson at all. There's just something off about the guy. And usually when you got some old hermits in this place, you know, all alone, after a while, things start getting to the guy. And this guy has a past, which we will go into that. But cutting right to the chase, of course, these young girls, they split up. And, you know, one by one, they end up in one of those type rooms where the room like comes alive and then you know, all these weird things start happening.
Woody.
And you got the one scene where the girl, her scarf, you know, it pulls, but nobody's pulling the scarf, you know. So there's definitely some otherworldly things at play here outside of just a human being killing people. Now, there's a lot of interesting things about the backstory of this movie. The director, David Schmoller, is based out of Texas. And there's something about Texas filmmakers, you know, Tobe Hooper, right? I caught a lot of similarities between this movie and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, just a group of young people, they get stuck and then they end up going to this weird family. Because at one time, Mr. Slauson, he actually had a family there. The backstory on that is that his brother ended up sleeping with his wife.
What are you looking at? Mr. Slauson's photo album. This must be his brother.
And so Mr. Slauson went crazy. Also, Mr. Slauson has telekinetic powers, kind of like Carrie. So this is kind of a hybrid of like Carrie and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's refreshing. Even for a movie that came out in 1979, this movie is very refreshing, actually. It's not your run-of-the-mill slasher movie that's a template, pretty much. Most slasher movies are give and take, they're a template. Killer picks off victims one by one by one, but this one is very unpredictable, actually. Sure, there are deaths in the movie, but I think all the deaths depend on the story around them, which makes the movie even more interesting to me. Never knowing what's around the corner. That's what I liked about this movie. Now, going behind the scenes on this, I watched this movie thinking it was rated R. I didn't think for a second that this was going to be PG. One, because slasher movies aren't PG for the most part, especially back then. And two, what I was witnessing on screen felt like R-rated material. And then I was shocked when I went and did my research on this movie and found out that it is PG. And to this day, this is really the only PG slasher in history, correct me if I'm wrong. But there's stuff in this movie, I think, that is like scarier than most R-rated slasher movies, especially today. Also, like as far as the kill scenes go in this movie, I think every single one of them is different. It isn't a guy with a knife killing people. You know, I talked about that first scene where all these objects were being thrust at the guy. That was because Mr. Slauson using his powers against these people. Mr. Slauson is a really messed up dude. His whole intention is to basically turn these people into mannequins. You know, he puts together these dolls, these mannequins. And it made me think, didn't I just review a movie that had mannequins in it, Maniac? And here I am, next movie I watch, and sure enough, there are mannequins all over the movie. And one thing I learned about myself, I don't like mannequins. They freak me out. And there are some really freaky mannequins in this movie, no doubt. Might be even more freaky than the ones in Maniac. And one thing about mannequins too is like, if you have a scene in a room full of mannequins, there's a good possibility in a horror movie that there could be a real person there, you know, with a mannequin face on. And I think that just heightens the tension of the movie. Oh, and by the way, Linnea Quigley is actually in this movie. She's not credited at all, but she is actually one of the mannequins. I still, as of this recording, have not found exactly which mannequin she is, but if there's a Linnea Quigley factoid that I can give you guys, you're going to get it. Now, I really like the young characters in this movie. You know, I guess the Prey. And if you give me that, then that's already a big step up because, let's face it, there's a lot of slasher movies out there with complete throwaway characters. But it doesn't hurt that one of them is the lovely Tanya Roberts. You might remember her from, of course, Beastmaster. She's in that 70s show. But I believe this was like one of her first movies, actually. But she plays Becky. And then there's this other character named Molly, played by Jocelyn Jones. And those are like my two favorites. Really, Jocelyn Jones is kind of the final girl in this because you really don't know who the final girl is because they don't really establish the characters like that. They all feel pretty similar, but I think in a good way. I think that just makes them more realistic too, actually. But Jocelyn Jones, you know, she came into this picture probably having the most training, you know, the most professional training as an actor. And I think that was a good thing for Chuck Smoller too, because she really kept him on his toes throughout the shoot. She would kind of give him pointers as far as like dealing with actors, because there's a lot of directors, they don't really know how to deal with actors. And it's nice when you have somebody with that experience that's classically trained and, you know, knows all the marks and everything. And she was really a valuable asset on set for the production. And then you had Chuck Connors, who is not classically trained at all, but he's just a natural actor.
She wanted to build a nice hotel down by the spring. She died so young.
As a matter of fact, there's like a story behind the scenes where you know, Jocelyn Jones is doing all this prep work, getting into character, trying to figure out what her character's motivations are. And then here's Chuck Connors on the other side saying, are we going to shoot yet? Like, what is she doing? And I'm not saying either one of them is wrong. It's just two completely different styles of working as an actor. Kind of the same thing that happened with the movie The Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. Two completely different types of actors. So I actually like learning about the nuts and bolts of actors behind the scenes because I think no two actors are the same, you know? And so it's interesting when they decipher each other's abilities. Now, a big reason why this movie didn't do that well at the box office is because it was PG. It's one of those situations where an R rating would have actually benefited it. Because when it was first released, like I said, it didn't do that well. What saved the movie was a couple things. One, it's a really good slasher movie. And two, this movie was playing on like Saturday afternoons because it's PG. And so all these like kids were watching this movie and completely being freaked out. If you're a guy of like my age, this might have been one of the first movies to actually scare you. I think it's interesting that PG movies are sometimes our doorways into horror because that's the only thing we can watch. For me, Poltergeist was a doorway into horror because it's PG. It would play on HBO during the day all the time when I was a kid, and it scared the crap out of me. And I think that's the reason why a lot of these R-rated, gems I'm discovering for the first time, because when I was a kid, I couldn't watch those movies or I just didn't even hear of them. A lot of these movies, they're not as accessible as like PG-rated movies are. But the PG rating is very deceiving, and I'm glad I didn't know that going into this because it feels like an R-rated movie. It's very creepy. It's a very well-directed film, actually. And I think in terms of like scaring the audience, it succeeds. Even Stephen King has applauded this movie time and time again, actually. He even used it in like one of his short stories. But it's that damn Texas horror. Now, as far as any cons, I think there are some cliche slasher character decisions that you might question, like why in the hell are you splitting up? Stuff like that, but it didn't really get in the way of the movie at all. I ended up having a blast with this movie, and I think more importantly, it stayed with me. Like after I watched it, I was like, God, that was different. That was just kind of weird. And then like a day, 2 days go by, and I can't get the movie out of my head. So to me, that's a great sign. When I can't get a movie out of my head, then usually I just want to watch it again. And I've actually watched this movie twice now. So I'm definitely giving this a high purchase worthy. Tourist Trap, I think it's a classic. So I definitely recommend picking this up. I'll put an Amazon affiliate link in the info box for you guys. Anytime I catch a slasher that a lot of you guys probably haven't seen, I like to try to get you guys out there to watch them. And I think you'll really dig this, especially if you like creepy mannequin face type stuff. So if you've seen Tourist Trap, let me know in the comments what you think. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.